Deaths in Glenmorach Manor, a fiction novel. Written by Shirley, read by Sir Lawrence Olivier. This audiobook was narrated using synthetic voice technology provided by 11 Labs. Chapter 17. The case of Benjamin Wallace's death had consumed my every waking moment for the past 10 days. I'd already spoken with a handful of people at Glenmorach Manor, Mr. Morrison, the family butler, Mrs. Thompson, the head of the servants, and Lydia, the young maid in charge of the firewood in the dining room that fateful night. Each conversation revealed a new piece of the puzzle, but one name kept appearing, not as a clear figure, but as a lingering shadow. Mr. Alan Faulkner. He was the Wallace family's horse trainer, not exactly a person one would consider as part of the intricate family affairs, but something about his presence that late afternoon, as he was seen speaking with Mrs. Thompson in the dining room, had caught my attention. Lydia mentioned it as if it were an innocent exchange, but I wasn't so sure. After all, if you were to poison someone, would you do it openly? I didn't think so. My instinct told me that Alan could hold the key to unraveling what happened that evening. I had Mr. Morrison send a message to the horse ranch to have Mr. Alan Faulkner come to the manor for questioning. I was determined to get to the bottom of this, and if he was involved, I'd make sure he was exposed. The door creaked open, and there he was, Alan Faulkner, tall and built like a man who spent most of his days working with horses. He had a hard face, one that seemed to have been carved from stone, but his eyes were sharp and calculating. He looked around for a moment before stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "Mr. Owen?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes, Mr. Faulkner," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "Please, have a seat." He did, though his posture remained rigid, and there was no hint of warmth in his demeanor. His hands rested on his knees, and his eyes studied me with an intensity that suggested he was no stranger to confrontations. "Mr. Faulkner, or can I call you Alan?" I asked him. "Just Alan, sir," he answered briefly. "So, Alan, would you mind telling me how long you've been working for the Wallace family?" I asked, trying to start with something neutral. Alan leaned back slightly, his expression remaining unreadable. "I've been with the Wallace for 10 years now. Started out as a stable hand, then worked my way up to horse trainer." He glanced at the floor for a moment before looking up at me. "How do you find the Wallace?" I asked him out of my curiosity about his impression of the family. He shrugged a small, dismissive gesture. "They're doing well. Lord Wallace is a good man, though he hasn't been around the stables much since the accident. Mr. Robert is thoughtful and caring, a genuinely decent man. Mr. Anthony is more reserved, but he knows his way around a vineyard. They're all hard workers. As for Lady Eleanor, she seems kind, at least from what I've observed." "And Mr. Benjamin?" I asked, allowing the question to hang in the air. Alan's poker face didn't crack. He didn't even flinch. "I've worked with Mr. Robert and Mr. Anthony for most of the time. I never had much to do with Mr. Benjamin, to be honest. The young master never came to the horse ranch. I didn't even know him well enough to form an opinion." I nodded. His indifference was exactly what I'd expected, but it was time to get to the heart of the matter. "Now, Alan, somebody told me that on the afternoon of Benjamin's death, you were in the dining room speaking to Mrs. Thompson while she was setting the table for dinner. Can you tell me what that was about?" His gaze narrowed slightly, but he didn't immediately respond. It seemed as though he was weighing his words carefully. Finally, he spoke. "Lady Eleanor had summoned me to the manor that day. There was something she needed to talk to me about her mare. When I arrived, I saw Mrs. Thompson working in the dining room, so I stopped by just to say hello. That's all, nothing more to it." I raised an eyebrow. "Just a friendly hello?" Alan nodded, his face impassive. "Yes. It's not uncommon to say hello to other staff, is it?" "Not at all," I replied, watching him carefully. "But I do wonder why Mrs. Thompson didn't mention to me if she was actually having you talk to her in the dining room during the dinner preparation. In fact, I was asking her already if there was anyone staying in the dining room for a longer time than it needed to, and she said no. It makes me wonder why she kept the important information to herself." And my duty is to find out every single person who had access to the dining room on that day before the murder of Mr. Benjamin Wallace. He shrugged again, though I noticed a slight tightness in his shoulders. Perhaps she forgot about it because our short conversation was not something important. How short? Can you tell me how long you were standing there in the dining room? Do you think it is appropriate for employees to chat while they are working? Perhaps you could have met her in the servants' quarters or the kitchen. I pushed him with more and more questions to break his plain reaction. Mr. Owen, I don't know where you got that information, but it was a short conversation. Not more than 5 minutes. He answered me calmly. Not more than 5 minutes? And after that, where did you go? I asked him again. I leaned back in my chair, assessing him. There was something about his response that didn't sit right with me. He answered me confidently. I went to see Lady Eleanor in the West Greenhouse. From which door did you come into the manor, Alan? I asked him again, hoping he would get into my trap this time. I came in from the back door in the kitchen. To get to the West Greenhouse, I had to pass the hall where the dining room was located. Then I saw Mrs. Thompson was setting the table. I admit that I stepped into the dining room for 5 minutes to talk, and that's it. I continued my steps to the West Greenhouse to meet Lady Eleanor there. But before I could ask further, Alan spoke again, as if he couldn't contain the question that had been bothering him. So, Mr. Owen, what is this all about? Are you suggesting I had something to do with the young Master Benjamin's death? I fixed my gaze on him, choosing my words carefully. Mr. Benjamin was poisoned before he was stabbed that night. Apparently, the poison was smeared on the dinnerware he used that night. And the fact that you were being seen in the dining room that afternoon talking to Mrs. Thompson is something I need to understand. As you were not someone expected to be working there at all. That's where all the dinnerware was placed, and your presence there was being kept from me. Alan's expression remained unchanged, though his jaw tightened ever so slightly. You're grasping at straws, Mr. Owen. I'm just a horse trainer. I had no part in any of this. I didn't even know the young master well enough to harm him, he said, his voice low but firm. And then he paused. About why Mrs. Thompson kept this information for herself. Why don't you just ask her? We have nothing to hide, sir. I studied him for a long moment. Seemed like he was telling me the truth. There was no guilt in his eyes. No nervousness. But then again, somebody could have the type of demeanor that would allow them to hide such things well. All right, Alan. I understand. But one last question. What's your relationship with Mrs. Thompson? You're both part of the staff, yes? He looked at me for a moment, a slight furrow in his brow. We worked together for this family, nothing more to it. I asked, raising an eyebrow. I just find it a bit curious that you were so eager to speak to her that afternoon. Is that so? Did you go back to the dining room after your meeting with Lady Eleanor? Then he answered me with his tone a little sharper now. No, sir. I didn't go back there. I'm a horse trainer, Mr. Owen. My place is in the horse ranch. My job isn't to socialize with the house staff. I saw Mrs. Thompson working there earlier. I said hello, had a small chat, and then I left. I nodded slowly. Very well. But I must say, Alan, you seem to have quite a poker face. You're a hard man to read. He didn't respond immediately. He just stared at me with those cold, calculating eyes. I'm sorry for not being able to help with your investigation, Mr. Owen. I've told you everything I know. If I may, I'll be leaving now. I leaned back in my chair and gave him a nod. You're free to go now, Alan, but do not leave the estate until the investigation is finished. Do I make myself clear? Yes, sir. It's clear enough for me, Alan answered. Then he stood up and opened the door to step out without saying another word. Alan left my office, leaving me to sift through the tangled web of lies and half-truths. Part 2. Alan Faulkner stepped out with an expression that betrayed little of what had transpired inside. The door clicked shut behind him, and he stood in the hallway, his tall frame lingering for a moment, before he turned to leave. But before he could take another step, a familiar voice called out to him. "Alan." Alan turned around to find Lady Eleanor standing at the end of the corridor, her elegant figure draped in a soft blue gown. Her eyes were wide, a glimmer of concern flickering beneath her composure. She was always so graceful, so poised, but tonight there was a tremor in her gaze that he hadn't seen before. Alan greeted her with a respectful nod, his usual stoic demeanor slipping for just a moment. "Lady Eleanor, I didn't expect to see you here," she replied with soft and calming voice, though there was an unmistakable air of curiosity in her voice. "I was just passing by." Her gaze drifted to the closed door behind him, and her lips parted as though she were unsure of how to phrase her next words. "Alan, what happened in there?" He could see the worry etched across her features, and for a fleeting moment, a pang of guilt stirred within him. He had been careful to keep their secret hidden, but Lady Eleanor was too perceptive for him to ignore her emotions. "It's nothing, really. Mr. Owen was just doing his job. He asked me about my whereabouts that afternoon, about what I was doing in the dining room with Mrs. Thompson. I told him the truth. I was simply saying hello to her," Alan said, trying to reassure her as he took a step toward her. Lady Eleanor frowned, her brow furrowing slightly. "And he believed you?" she asked, her voice soft, though there was a sharp edge to her tone that she couldn't quite mask. "I think so. He's just doing his job, my lady. It makes sense that he would want to question everyone who was around when Benjamin," Alan replied, his expression unreadable as he studied her. He trailed off, and his words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Lady Eleanor glanced down for a moment, taking a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Her brother's death still cast a dark shadow over everything, and the last thing she wanted was for someone she cared about to become embroiled in this tragedy. She began again, her voice quieter now. "Alan, I worry. What if they suspect you? You were there, in the dining room. It's too close. Too much of a coincidence." Alan stepped closer, closing the distance between them, his eyes softening. He reached out and gently placed a hand on her arm. "Don't worry about me, my lady. I didn't do anything wrong. I told Mr. Owen the truth. He's just a man doing his job, just like the rest of us. If I were guilty of anything, I would have acted differently, wouldn't I?" Her gaze met his, and for a brief moment, the world around them seemed to disappear. The manor, the investigations, the ever-looming shadow of Benjamin's death. It all faded into the background. There were only the two of them, standing together in the dimly lit hallway, the air between them thick with something more than just concern. "You always know how to calm me down," she said. Her voice was a soft whisper, her fingers brushing the side of his hand in a small, almost imperceptible gesture. Alan let out a low chuckle. The sound was warm and comforting. "That's because I'm not going anywhere. You know that, my lady. I wouldn't let anything happen to you or me, and I certainly wouldn't let anyone accuse me of something I didn't do." She nodded slowly, though the worry in her eyes hadn't completely faded. "You promise me, Alan. Promise me you won't let this investigation pull you in deeper than it needs to." "I promise. There's nothing to worry about. Mr. Owen is thorough, and that's all. He's just trying to piece things together. But I haven't done anything wrong, and I won't let this mess with us," he replied, his voice firm, his grip on her arm tightening just a little. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood there, the tension in the air intense yet strangely comforting. A silence hung between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was familiar, the kind of silence that comes when two people understand each other without needing to say a word. "Good, because I can't bear the thought of losing you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Alan's gaze softened. His hand slowly moved to her cheek, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear as he stepped even closer. Their bodies were touching now, You won't lose me, my lovely lady. Not now. Not ever. She leaned into his touch, her breath shaky as she closed her eyes for just a moment. The world outside seemed to pause, the cold stone walls of Glenmorach Manor fading into the distance as she felt Alan's warmth near her, so close and steady. Alan said after a brief moment, his voice thick with unspoken longing, "I should go home. This mansion is not my place to be around." Before he could finish, Eleanor reached up and placed a hand on his chest, stopping him for a brief moment. "Just a moment," she whispered. And then, without another word, she stepped forward, closing the remaining distance between their faces. She stood on her toes, her lips brushing softly against his. It was a kiss that spoke volumes, a promise, a shared desire, and the weight of all the secrets they had kept from the world. Alan's hand slipped to her waist, pulling her gently, as if to imprint this moment in his memory forever. It was brief, but it was enough. A stolen kiss in the shadows, a secret they would carry with them through the chaos of the days to come. When they finally broke apart, their faces were inches apart, breaths mingling in the cold air of the hallway. Neither of them spoke, as if savoring the closeness they had just shared. "I have to go now. We'll see each other again tomorrow. If you need me, you know where to find me," Alan said quietly, his hand lingering at her waist for a moment longer, before he reluctantly pulled away. Lady Eleanor nodded, her hand lingering on his for just a moment before she let him go. "I'll be thinking of you." "I know," he said with a soft smile, his gaze lingering on her one last time before he turned to leave. As he walked away, Lady Eleanor stood there in the hallway, her heart heavy with the weight of their secret. There was so much at stake. Her reputation, his future, and the love they shared, that had to remain hidden from the rest of the world. But in that moment, she knew she would do anything to protect what they had, even if it meant living in the shadows. And as the sound of Alan's footsteps faded, she let out a long, silent breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The investigation was far from over, and the truth of Benjamin's death still eluded them all. But Eleanor believed in one thing. Alan was not guilty of the crime, and she would stand by him, no matter the cost. And the secret love they shared together would be their anchor through the storm.